Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. As we told you yesterday, there was an inversion of the interest rates, and suddenly the short-term interest rates were yielding more than the long-term, and that is usually the precursor for a recession. And so, following that, there was a massive 800-point drop in the stock market yesterday, and it shook global markets. But are investors seeing signs of a U.S. recession? Is it spreading worldwide? And many are talking about the trade war with China. What's causing it? And what are you supposed to do with your money? Well, the president blames the Fed, but I don't believe that. Jenna Browder has more on this story.
Investors are bracing for more shaking on Wall Street. Still, President Trump appears confident, tweeting America is strong and winning. Fears of a recession are growing after the Dow dropped more than 800 points Wednesday. The tumble due to a number of factors, including what's called an inverted yield curve. This is what happens when the yield, the interest rate the government pays to borrow money, on the 10-year Treasury is lower than the 2-year. The last time this happened was back in 2007, right before the Great Recession.
What do you think? Is a recession on the way?
No, I don't think so, but there's no question the economy has slowed down.
Stephen Moore, an economist with the Heritage Foundation, points to two factors.
Number one, the ongoing trade war with China and the uncertainty that that has created. And the second factor has been the Fed, which, in my opinion and Donald Trump's opinion, has been way too tight. And when you have the interest rates this low and the inverted yield curve, that's a sign of Fed being way too tight with money, and that needs to be reversed.
President Trump has backed off his threat to impose new tariffs on Chinese goods.
We're doing this for Christmas season, just in case some of the tariffs would have an impact on U.S. customers.
And in a series of tweets insisting, unlike others, our economy is strong. But the Hong Kong protests and China's reaction could have an impact on trade negotiations. This morning, the president tweeting they might have to wait until the situation is resolved. Of course, China wants to make a deal. Let them work humanely with Hong Kong first. The president saying the Chinese president is a good man and even suggesting a personal meeting. One institution he's blaming for the sluggish economy is the Federal Reserve. And despite a quarter-point cut last month, Trump is calling for the Fed to further cut interest rates to stimulate the economy. Moore agrees, adding that the president needs a good economy heading into 2020.
I happen to think there will be a deal that gets done in the next 6 months with China. And when that happens, I think the stock market and the real economy springs back to life in a very powerful way. So there's a real incentive to get a deal done that both countries can live by. And by the way, it will make both countries' economies perform much better.
In the meantime, falling Treasury rates do have an upside for consumers. They mean lower mortgage rates. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. There are amazing mortgage rates out there. A lot of people are running to refinance mortgages, and I would certainly counsel you to do exactly that if you can work out the economics so that it's in your favor. But these are historic low interest rates, and you know, there's only so much lower the Fed can go. You can talk about, well, the Fed needs to cut, but at what point do they stop cutting? Things are so low now, the people who are trying to live on a fixed income are having a real hard time. We'll talk more about that during this program, but nevertheless, there are things to do to protect your money. We want to tell you about them later on. Well, in other news, a gunman shot 6 officers and held police at bay for hours in Philadelphia last night. John Jessup has more of that.
That is right, Pat. A Philadelphia man is in custody after a shootout and standoff with police that sent at least 6 officers to the hospital with gunshot wounds. George Thomas shows us the drama that unfolded on the streets of North Philly.
The rush hour standoff stretched into the night, finally ending with the suspect surrendering to police. 34-year-old Maurice Hill, a longtime drug offender, gave up shortly after midnight, ending the 8-hour ordeal in a North Philly neighborhood that began when police tried to serve a drug warrant.
We have an officer shot, and they're still being shot at.
Please send additional cars immediately. Send additional cars.
It was dramatic moments Wednesday afternoon as the situation became critical for officers dealing with Hill, who had barricaded himself in a home. A police spokesman says he fired multiple rounds at them as officers returned fire while trying to dodge bullets. Patrol cars, special SWAT and tactical teams rushed to the scene, blocking off the streets and working to rescue fellow officers trapped in the house. Police also rescued 2 women and 2 teenage girls in the area. One witness saying she heard at least 100 gunshots.
I heard so many gunshots that I got scared.
Philadelphia's mayor says the 6 officers have been released from area hospitals and are in good spirits. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thank you, George. Planned Parenthood is set to lose millions in federal funding in coming days because of a new Trump administration rule forbidding federal funding to any family programs that provide or refer patients for abortion. Planned Parenthood receives about $60 million taxpayer dollars every year through the Title X program. The nation's largest abortion provider says unless a judge intervenes to block the rule, it will withdraw from the program on August 19th. Pro-life groups credit President Trump with keeping a campaign promise to defund Planned Parenthood. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may bar Congresswomen Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib from entering Israel this month. The Washington Post reporting Netanyahu consulted with cabinet members Wednesday about the decision. Tlaib and Omar support boycotts against Israel and have been accused of making anti-Semitic comments. An Israeli law passed in 2017 bars boycott supporters from entering Israel, but exceptions can be made for foreign government officials. The representatives, Pat, are scheduled to arrive in Israel this weekend.
Folks, I want to say very clearly, I think that it would be a mistake to give those 2 women any publicity, and by barring them from Israel, suddenly they become martyrs, and that would be a mistake. I think our dear friend Benjamin Netanyahu would be wise just to let them come into the country and as an agent of a foreign, or at least an official of a foreign government. John?
Well, Pat, the 18-year war in Afghanistan may be coming to a close as U.S. and Afghan diplomats negotiate for peace with the Taliban. But with rising violence and Afghanistan's presidential elections coming up soon, no one is certain what the country will look like by the end of the year. Chuck Holton traveled to Kabul to find out.
This Afghan street market in the capital city of Kabul is bustling after Friday prayers. But there's a tension in the air anytime large groups of people are found in one place. The threat of suicide bombers is at an all-time high and are now an almost daily occurrence. In late July, the city suffered 3 car bombs in one day. Abdul Muhammad was nearby for one of them.
I was doing my duty inside our compound. I heard an explosion and I came out. I saw a couple of wounded victims on the ground near our office and over there. The target was 2 vehicles, but I don't know who was inside the vehicles.
Donald Trump says he's tired of hearing that the United States is losing the war in Afghanistan, and he says the American people feel the same way. And that's why the U.S. military has been having talks with our enemies, the Taliban, here in Afghanistan to try to come up with a ceasefire. But even while they're doing that, the Taliban has been stepping up attacks around Kabul, like the one that happened right here in front of Kabul University in mid-July. They killed more than 10 people. Over 17,000 coalition troops are still in the country, but their role has changed dramatically from direct action to one that's more focused on advise and assist. This means Afghan troops are doing the lion's share of the fighting and dying as well. Another contributing factor to the uptick in violence we're seeing across Afghanistan right now are the upcoming presidential elections at the end of September. Back in July, there was a massive complex attack at this building behind me, which were the offices of the president's running mate, Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, the incumbent. And it just shows that the Taliban is flexing its muscles in advance of that upcoming election. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in August that the solutions to Afghanistan's problems are diplomatic, not military, and that the U.S. is committed to working with the Afghan government to finally extricate our forces from the country. Despite the recent increases in violence, things have gotten better in Afghanistan since I started coming here, at least back in 2007, 2008. You can look at factors like the infant mortality rate, which has gone way down. Gross domestic product is 5 times what it used to be. And life expectancy, which was only 43 years, is now in the mid-60s. So things are getting better, but the concern is that if the U.S. leaves precipitously, it could cause a lot of those gains to be reversed. But for the shoppers in this Afghan market, the best future they can hope for right now is to simply make it home to their families for one more day. From Kabul, Afghanistan, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Pat, signs of progress there, but the question is for how long?
Yeah. You know, the Taliban put in place a most extreme form of Muslim Islamic law, and they restricted women, they restricted education for young women. It was horrible. And to think that we can deal with those people is crazy. And the Afghan people were so glad to be free of the Taliban. Now we're making a deal with them. And to think those people are going to be benign when they come back is insane. But Afghanistan is ungovernable. They're warlords. They make their biggest profit off the selling of opium. The opium poppies are sold all over the world. It's a big source. We've never, we could have gotten rid of those opium poppies. We never did it because it would have been such a blow to the, quote, Afghan economy. I mean, we're in a bed with the devil over there. And the people who've been elected are nothing but puppets, and it's a mess. And my feeling is, you know, leave them alone. Let the warlords kill each other. I mean, why should we be involved? You know, it looked like that was a hiding ground for Al-Qaeda, but it's just, since Alexander the Great, nobody's been able to control Afghanistan. Why do we think we can? And my counsel would be just get out of the dumb place and let them fight it among themselves, because in my opinion, it's ungovernable and will continue to be ungovernable. John?
Pat, here at home, more severe summer weather is coupling with extreme heat, hail, and lightning across the nation. The heat index was in excess of 100 degrees from coast to coast, with a high of 117 in Palm Springs, California. In Nashville, North Carolina, severe storms with powerful lightning strikes took down trees, damaging homes and power lines. In Colorado, the severe weather brought record-breaking hail. A meteorologist verified the record with one hailstone measuring at 4.8 inches in diameter and weighing 1.5 pounds. And Pat, one driver, semi-truck driver, said that the wind literally rocked her truck.
Yeah, well, fortunately, we're in an area that's fairly benign, but the weather has just been awful, and we're just coming into the hurricane season. Well, anyhow.